So real quick, let's take a look at what happens if we actually change the path. Now, if I go in my current directory and I say cat, it says bark. Let's change the path to take out dot, and I'm going to just take that path, copy it and paste it in here, and you'll notice that it doesn't have a dot at the beginning. Now when I say cat, it does something weird, but it doesn't say bark. If I say cat ABC, it's back to the system cat. So one of the reasons why dot quite often is left out of people's paths is because there is some danger that if you put in dot, it will change what you get to run as you're moving around the file system. There are other things that are going on there, but that is usually the reason that that is done that way. I like dot in the beginning because I'm usually developing commands, and as I'm testing something, I want to be able to run it in the current directory that I'm in. So if I'm building some new command like D200, whatever D200 does, and I'm modifying it and testing it, modifying it and testing it, I would prefer not to have to say dot/D200 every time. I would prefer to have it run the one that's in the current directory, even though it adds some danger to my life. So you can change these, and one of the things that you would say is, what are all the variables that you have set? This is probably going to be a list that is going to be hugely long, but if I type env, it will list out the variables that I have in my shell. And you will see that there is a slew of them. So there are lots of variables that I have, and I probably don't go and set each one of these every time I log in. There's actually some commands that get run at the beginning of login. One of those is bash rc, another is profile. You notice I put a dot bash rc and a dot profile. We'll get to what the dot at the beginning of things does. But if you look in my bash rc, you'll see that this particular thing has some things set in it, some exports. And each one of these exports is a variable. And the fact that it says export means that other programs that get run get to see it. And up here at the top, it sets the path to whatever the current path is. That's the $, and then some new things that get added to the path. So this is what sets it at the beginning of my run. And each time the shell starts, it runs this file and it sets this bunch of variables. If I want to unset a variable, I can do that, but generally speaking, what I want to do is I want to have a base system that has things defined. Now, if we go in here and we say, what path are we at? pwd, which lists the current path, you'll notice that that is really long and will be really annoying to type. I have set something that I have a variable that gives me that piece of the path. So when I want to end up in a directory, I can always say cd $uw/ some other thing in here. And I don't have to type the beginning part. So I set up variables that I use on a regular basis that implement pieces of what I want to do. It also, because I'm putting it in a file that I have access to, reminds me of where I have put things, which is also useful too. It gives me a list over time of how I've organized my files. Now, there are other reasons for using environment variables. Quite often you may not want to put something in a current directory, and instead you want to put it in an environment variable so that you can access it in that directory, but it's at some other location. There's a lot of security reasons why you might choose to do that. So we've got variables, we can set them, and I promised I'd get back to quote marks. If I do echo single quote UW, it just prints out that kind of UW. If I do echo quote, it prints out the substituted form. So single quotes do not substitute variables, double quotes do. And you have to decide which thing you want to happen at that particular point in time. Do you want to print out the $, or do you want to substitute variables? What happens if I substitute a variable that doesn't exist? it substitutes for nothing. And not only does it substitute for nothing, but that isn't an error either. So if you have some variable that isn't set, you get back an empty string. And you can use this to concatenate things together and set options. The quote marks allow you to put in spaces. You can actually easily concatenate things to build things up.